Good to have you here. Very excited to introduce our second keynote speaker, particularly as someone who's worked in the Baltimore district for the past 13 years. I've had the great privilege to work with Brother Dennis Malloy directly in my role as principal and as president of St. John's College High School. Brother Dennis Malloy is the current and first visitor for the District of Eastern North America. Previously, he served as the auxiliary visitor and then visitor of our legacy Baltimore district. Prior to this, he spent many years in the St. Gabriel system, serving in a variety of capacities, including CEO. During the 1980s, he spent a few years at West Philadelphia Catholic High School. Brother Dennis has master's degrees in religious education from LaSalle University and social work masters from Catholic University. In 2000, he was selected as the Distinguished LaSalle Educator for the Baltimore district. I give you Brother Dennis Malloy.
So, who thought having a speaker at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon was a good idea? And I'd like to tell you I could keep it brief, but I just seem to get longer and longer all the time. As an aide, Bob Berger also requested that copies of my presentation be on the table in case you can't understand my accent. So good afternoon. I'd like to share 2 quotes with you to suggest a spirit or a frame as we continue to take up the challenges of mission before us. The first is a quote from Robert Kennedy. All of us might wish at times that we lived in a more tranquil world, but we don't. And if our times are difficult and perplexing, so are they challenging and filled with opportunity. Our second quote is from John Baptist de La Salle. Do not let anticipation of tomorrow be a burden on the day that is passing. What you lack in the evening, the morrow will bring you if you know how to hope in God. As we gather these days in our first mission assembly, we have to marvel that we are now in our 3rd year of journey as the District of Eastern North America. Our first charge was to ensure the unity and communion of the new district. Working together in good synergy to meet this objective were the implementation of the District Council of the Brothers, the Mission Council of Partners and Brothers, the formation of many other committees, the great goodwill and energy among all LaSallians to forge our new district reality, and the bilocation of several members of the district leadership team across the geography of Dina in that first year. We gather now in these days to deepen our unity and communion and to discern together the mission vision and directional priorities of our district for the next 4 years. The mission itself is clear: to give a human and Christian education to the young, especially the poor. How we do this as we live into the future is the work of our assembly. We find ourselves in a setting where Jesus himself felt at home. He preached on the shore of the Galilee. He called Simon and Andrew, James and John from its waterfront. He taught the apostles how to bless the little that they had to work with to feed the 5,000 along its banks. And he withdrew by boat to its solitary places to seek God's will and God's grace to see that will through. It is this last activity that we take up together in these days, to seek God's will for us through our conversation and prayer, and critically God's grace to see it through. To quote some signature Brother Alvaro lines, we ask ourselves, what does the Lord require of us today? And where are we willing to travel? So we do not come together for a business meeting or for an exercise in corporate strategic planning. We gather in assembly these days for an apostolic activity. We gather as a charismatic expression of church, following Jesus in the footsteps of John Baptist de La Salle. We gather together as a discerning community, reading the signs of our times, reflecting on the reality of who we are at this moment in our history and our journey together. Considering the needs of young people and their families, both here and beyond the geography of Dina, in response to what we are called to do through the Institute, through the church, and young people, the needs of young people who are poor and far from salvation. And we do all of this mindful of Brother Alvaro's reference to Archbishop Romero this morning, with eyes wide open and feet planted firmly on the ground, aware of our giftedness, but also our limitations, but inspired by John Baptist de La Salle, who reminds us, be satisfied with what you can do, since this satisfies God, but do not spare yourself in what you can do with the help of grace. Be convinced that provided you are willing, you can do more with the help of God's grace than you can imagine. And so let us discern and act confidently in the service of that grace in these days. Our mission assembly is the third of three interrelated movements for the deepening and strengthening of the district. We as brothers began the first movement this past April with the first session of the First District Chapter, followed by the Call to Be Brothers retreat this summer, which focused on deepening the brothers' relationship with Jesus, inviting us to live more the contemplative dimension of our lives, and renewing our faith and zeal for the mission. In March of 2012, we will bring the second session of the district chapter to a close as it finishes its work and accepts the work of the mission assembly. We, partners and brothers, do all of these things under the overarching banner of Together and by Association for Mission, a journey of hope. The theme chosen by representatives from each of the three respective planning committees for chapter, mission, and Call to Be Brothers retreat. The banners before us visualize the dynamic unity of these three movements. They remind us that we, brothers, journey with you, our partners who have wagered much yourselves on this new district, and without whom the District of Eastern North America would not be possible. Prominent in each of these three banners are the Journey Road and the Star of Faith, which recall St. La Salle's meditation for the Feast of the Epiphany, and the Magi, who, guided by the star, came to recognize Jesus in the poor rags of the manger. These companion images speak to us of a Lasallian community that must always be discerning the new inspirations of the Spirit, and of a community that is forever on the move, seeking God and God's mission for us in each new day, moving away from what is comfortable, not becoming sedentary or self-content, even at the cost of recasting or leaving an old and beloved ministry. The task before us is threefold: to pass several pieces of legislation, the most innovative of which are the bylaws of the Mission Executive Council, to further the process of developing a transformative vision of the future, a vision that we aspire to and that we believe that God is calling us to as a community, and to articulate directional statements that will help us to chart the broad course of action in pursuit of our vision. As we approach these tasks, we need to consider briefly the signs of the times, the realities of our context. While there are many that might be considered, I am focusing on the following five. The first is the U.S. economy, in general and with particular concern for its effect on families and young people. Economically, we are living in a time of great uncertainty and upheaval that is evident in the volatility of our financial markets, characterized by high unemployment and political polarization. We are in this moment more impacted by the political and economic realities beyond our borders than at any time in history. The positive correlation between the events around the globe and the volatility of our U.S. markets illustrates compelling evidence that the two are very much connected. What in the past had been a seemingly measured and somewhat predictable steady growth has been replaced by a roller coaster ride of market gyrations on almost a daily basis, reflecting a sense of ambiguity and a lack of direction that stifles even the most optimistic investor. Since the near financial meltdown of 2008, U.S. households have seen almost $13 trillion in wealth evaporate. More than 6 million jobs have been lost, and the unemployment rate appears headed for its highest level since 1940. Applying these factors to the real world in which many of our young people and their families live, the concrete effects on the U.S. economy can be seen in the following statistics on unemployment, the slip from the middle class status, and household foreclosures. The Department of Labor notes that we are in the worst jobs crisis since the Great Depression. While the official unemployment rate is 9.1%, if you add the people who can only find part-time work or who've stopped looking altogether, the rate is over 16%, or roughly 1 in 6 people in the labor force. A Pew study released this past month entitled Downward Mobility for the Middle Class, Waking Up from the American Dream, notes that nearly 1 in 3 Americans who grew up in middle class has slipped down the income ladder as an adult. The great American dream of a house, a college education for your kids, and savings for a comfortable retirement is now out of reach for a steadily growing number of families. Regarding U.S. households, a recent report by the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission notes that 1 out of every 200 households will be foreclosed upon. Every 3 months, 250,000 new families will enter into foreclosure, and 1 child in every classroom in America is at risk of losing his or her home. A recent government report on the 2010 census entitled Income, Poverty, and Health Insurance in the U.S. notes that more than a fifth of the youth under the age of 18 lived in poverty last year. Poverty rates for children rose from 20.7% in 2009 to 22% last year, making kids more likely than any other group in America to be poor. This picture is even bleaker for children under the age of 6, 25% of whom live in poverty. A second sign of the times, 2 significant demographic trends in U.S. Catholic affiliation. First is the significant number of Catholics leaving Catholicism. The second is the growth of the U.S. Hispanic Catholic population. First, those leaving. The Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life's 2008 report, U.S. Religious Landscape Study, based on a survey of 35,000 adult Americans, noted that 1 out of 3 adult Americans who were raised Catholic have left the church. In a follow-up study in 2009, Faith in Flux, the Pew Research Center reported almost half of all the Catholics who are now unaffiliated left Catholicism before reaching the age of 18, as did 1/3 who are now Protestant. Among both groups, an additional 3 in 10 left the Catholic Church as young adults between the ages of 18 and 23. A staggering number of those who left the church did so and continue to do so as teenagers and before the age of 24. Of those now unaffiliated, 71% reported that they just drifted away. Of those now Protestant, 71%, the same percentage, note that their spiritual needs were not being met. It's a hell of an indictment, that young people didn't feel engaged by their faith communities, our faith communities, and their spiritual needs were not being met. The Pew study notes that Catholicism has lost more people to other religions or to no religion than any other religious group. These numbers matter, folks, because they are not just alarming statistics. They are our brothers and sisters, our nieces and nephews, our children and grandchildren, our friends, our colleagues and students, and even our spouses and parents. Another disturbing trend, not researched yet, but beginning to get attention in the independent Catholic press, is the number of devout adult Catholics who are leaving the church. These are educated women and men who have raised their families in the church, but who have grown discouraged in their hope of seeing the teachings of Vatican II realized, who have little hope of real institutional reform, and who doubt the wisdom and elements of the church's teaching on matters of sexual morality or gender roles. These Catholics are not drifting away from the church, but intentionally leaving, typically for other Christian churches, as a matter of conscience. The second demographic trend, the growth of the U.S. Hispanic Catholic population. Despite the large numbers of Catholics who leave the church, the Catholic percentage of the U.S. population continues to hover around 25%. This is the result of the growing number of Hispanic Catholics immigrating to the U.S. and the higher birth rates among immigrant Hispanic families. According to the 2008 Pew Survey on Religion, 30% of the U.S. Catholic population is now Hispanic. While they only account for 15% of Catholics over the age of 50, they account for 60% of Catholics under 35 years of age. In a 2008 article, the Pew Hispanic Center reported that Hispanic students now make up 1 in 5 public school students in the U.S., and that strong growth in Hispanic enrollment is expected to continue for decades. A New York Times article in January 2009 noted that while the percentage of Catholic children attending Catholic schools nationwide is 15%, only 3% of Hispanic Catholic children have access to Catholic schools. As U.S. Catholicism continues to grow with the influx of Hispanic immigrants to the U.S., they are also less likely to have completed a high school education and more likely to find themselves in low-income jobs. In this sense, as the U.S. Church becomes more immigrant, it will also become poor and less likely to have access to Catholic schools. A third sign of the times. The faith of American youth today in general and findings regarding Catholic youth. Kendra Creasy-Dean, a researcher for the Lilly Endowment-sponsored National Study of Youth and Religion, and author of the 2010 book, Almost Christian, What the Faith of Our Teenagers is Telling the American Church, states the following in the very first sentence of her book. Let me save you some trouble. Here is the gist of what you are about to read. American young people are theoretically fine with religious faith, but it does not concern them very much, and it is not durable enough to survive long after they graduate from high school. And one more thing, we're responsible. The national study, a 3-phase longitudinal survey of 3,400 13 to 17-year-olds, began in 2001 and was funded through 2010, reports that generally young people are incredibly articulate about their faith, are incredibly inarticulate about their faith, their religious beliefs and practices, and its meaning in their lives. Religion is in the background of their lives, unfocused and implicit, important but not a priority, valued but not invested in, and praised but not describable. Ultimately, the observations of Dean's books and the findings of the national study seem more of a commentary on how faith communities have failed to engage young people than on the lack of religious feeling and commitment on the part of young people. The national study summarizes U.S. youth's religious convictions as moralistic therapeutic deism, particularly evident among Protestant and Catholic youth. The creed of moralistic therapeutic deism, according to the national study, is a God exists who created and orders the world and watches over human life. God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other. The central goal in life is to be happy and feel good about oneself. God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life except when God is needed to resolve a problem. And good people go to heaven when they die. Please note well the absence of any expression of personal relationship with Jesus or God and any sense of real engagement or membership in a faith community. The good news is that most U.S. teens feel generally positive toward religion and embrace some religious identity. The bad news is that most religious congregations in the U.S. are failing in religiously engaging and educating young people. This is a reality borne out in the previously referenced Pew study, noting the great number of Catholics, young Catholics, 18 to 23, who leave the church. Two variables stand out regarding the impact of faith formation in measuring emerging adults: the positive impact of any faith formation versus none, and the faith formation by committed parents in the teenage years. The study concludes that the greater the availability of religiously grounded relationships, activities, programs, and opportunities for teenagers, the more likely teens are to be religiously engaged and invested. In other words, congregations that prioritize youth ministry and support for their parents, invest in trained and skilled youth ministry leaders, and make serious efforts to engage and teach adolescents seem much more likely to draw young people into their religious lives and to foster religious and spiritual maturity in their youngest members. Are you still with me? Why don't you take a gulp of ice water? And I apologize for the high quality, dull nature of my presentation. Our fourth sign of the times, the state of Catholic schools today. I won't go into detail about this sign of the times. You need only Google the NCEA website for information on Catholic school trend data to get the statistical picture. And you know well from your firsthand experiences the challenges of sustaining Catholic schools today. The U.S. Catholic Bishops' Conference, in its 2005 pastoral, Renewing Our Commitment to Catholic Elementary and Secondary Schools in the Third Millennium, moved quickly in articulating the goal of keeping Catholic schools available, accessible, and affordable. Has a very nice ring to it. Keeping Catholic schools available, accessible, and affordable, but meeting the challenge remains a very formidable process. A number of our own middle and secondary schools are threatened by the ongoing challenges of increased costs, declining enrollments, increasing need for financial aid, and shrinking endowments. The fragility of some of our educational ministries and associated brothers' communities, primarily in service to young people from working class and economically struggling families, has already resulted in our closing or withdrawing from 5 schools in the last 2 years. As we look to renew our existing works and to create new ones for the educational needs of the poor, the call of the 44th General Chapter, it is imperative that we do so based on sound financial models that are sustainable. In the words of a director of finance who will remain nameless, no money, no mission. If, as the bishops say, Catholic schools are the responsibility of the entire Catholic community, then we need to innovate new and creative ways of engaging this entire community for the long haul. 3 co-relevant areas of need for Catholic school viability, articulated by Notre Dame University's Alliance for Catholic Education, are the need to recruit and form effective school leaders, to recruit and form a new generation of effective Catholic school teachers, and to form partnerships with Catholic colleges and universities. Our last sign of the times, the diminishing number of brothers and First LaSallians and the gift of charism. On Wednesday, September the 9th, 1909, day 1 of Dina, there were 382 Brothers of the Christian schools in this district. As of this afternoon, there are 355 of us. In these 26 months, we are 27 fewer. In 4 years, we will be 60 fewer or more. It is a time for us of rapid diminishment. While there are still 184 brothers in full-time and 25 brothers in part-time ministry, our largest cohorts of working brothers, men between 60 and 75, are steadily moving away from full and part-time ministry. Simultaneously, many of the great Lasallians, men and women who have been pioneers and partners in the Lasallian conversation and mission, are also aging and beginning to move away from ministry. Brother Miguel Campos, in his conversations with us, has exhorted us to have a greater sense of urgency and generativity in embracing shared mission and inviting our colleagues to discover within the Lasallian mission a deeper sense of their own vocational call. If we hope to see the Lasallian mission prosper and thrive, it is essential that we do all that we are able individually and communally to share the gift that we have received. This in itself should be viewed by each of us as an integral aspect of our own ministry. The good news is that there are many who have participated in Lasallian formation and today not only contribute to the furtherance of the mission, but also feel drawn to and identify with something deeper than simply ministry collaboration. In recent years, the conversation has begun to move from shared mission to shared charism. The 43rd General Chapter speaks of this in reference to those partners who collaborate in the Lasallian mission and who feel a call to deepen the charism, spirituality, and Lasallian communion in which they participate. The 44th General Chapter notes that the brothers live their religious consecration along with other people who share the same Lasallian charism, becoming for them and with them the heart, memory, and guarantor of the Lasallian charism. Circular 461 on association highlights the Church's recognition of people who are not members of a religious institute taking part in the charismatic ideals of a religious institute, committing themselves to a specific way of living God's call through an institute's charism, especially in mission, community life, and spirituality. For me, a most critical insight is one made by Brother Antonio Botana, a noted theologian, sociologist, and Lasallian scholar, in his recent article, From Sharing the Mission to Living the Charism in a Family, published in the inaugural issue of the Digital Review of Lasallian Research, which can be found on the Institute website. Working from the church premise that the charism which we share for the service of the mission is the gift of the Holy Spirit, he states that an authentic shared mission must include sharing the gift of charism, which can only be granted by the Spirit, the divine person, and is lived in communion. He goes further to state that if Lasallian educational works have been able to maintain a spirit for a long time, it is because they were integrated into a network of relationships where this spirit was shared. I don't think this is a revelation to those of you who have already lived the charism as part of your own vocational spirituality, but Brother Antonio does a great job of putting into words what is and what is becoming more our personal and communal experience. Brother Antonio states the challenge of our current reality well in simple terms in 2 clear sentences. Shared mission that does not create a charismatic family is a frustrated mission. That second generation of teachers that enters a school and does not find the family to support the spirit or the charismatic blood of the school is a generation that will assist in closing the school, at least in terms of a school that bears a charism. Actively building the Lasallian community, the charismatic family, in each of our ministries for the mission is important, certainly, but it is as important for the community to possess, to preserve, and to increase the charism, which is both the gift of the Holy Spirit and the life of the Spirit itself. It is a time to move the message, well established around mission, to mission and charism, in which we all have a part, but which only a community can possess and convey. How about another gulp of ice water out there? You hanging in? Just 3 pages left. So what are we called to do in light of the gospel and the Lasallian mission? Neither the gospel nor Hebrew scripture, neither the purpose of the Institute of the Brothers of the Christian Schools, nor anything in our Lasallian heritage, neither the documents of our recent International Mission Assembly, nor of our General Chapter give us a break on service to the poor because times are tough or because it's too difficult to work with young people who are from economically challenging circumstances. Document 4 on the educational service of the poor from the 44th chapter states our situation as follows. We brothers and Lasallians are challenged to be truly convinced that the educational service of the poor is a constitutive part of our Lasallian identity, vocation, and mission. The commitment to the transformation of our educational works as instruments of education for the poor, the defense of the rights of children, and education for social justice still greatly concern us. We dream that the renewal of our existing educational works be done not only with the criteria of success and social prestige, but with the ideal of fidelity to our vocation and our identity as ambassadors of Jesus Christ, announcing the gospel to the poor. In consideration of the International Mission Assembly of 2006, the General Chapter of 2007, and the current signs of the times, the overarching challenges from my perspective are, first, how will we ensure the sustainability of our current works while at the same time keeping them accessible to young people who are from challenged economic circumstances? Second, how will we respond to the new needs of the poor, in particular the growing Hispanic Catholic population that will have such an important role to play in the future of the U.S. Church? Third, given the fact that so many young people drift away from the church if they have not been engaged in communities that are responsive to their faith needs, how can we, as a charismatic expression of the church, be evangelically relevant for these young people in a growing culture of whateverism? Fourth, how can we be more effective in awakening and accompanying young people in their vocational discernment for service in the church, as teachers, as youth ministers, as lay ministers in parishes, brothers, sisters, deacons, and priests? This may seem like a small point, perhaps even an incidental point, but all of us are here because there were those men and women in faith who were an inspiration to us. So what will we do to create a culture of vocations for all of the young people in our schools? Fifth, how can we more intentionally and explicitly possess, preserve, and increase the vitality of the charismatic community of Lasallians in our ministries in order to ensure the mission? And sixth, how can we increase effective formation for Lasallian mission leadership to ensure the apostolic and charismatic leadership of our ministries? Finally, hope grounded in faith. We have across the district many examples of innovation in reaching out to young people in need. The hope that we journey with has the power to make us go beyond our challenges and fears to do creative and perhaps as yet unimaginable things. It is a hope that will drive us forward in new ways for the future. At this past Lasallian Association for Secondary School Chief Administrators workshop in March, I was struck by the words of one of the keynote presenters, Ray McNulty, president of the International Center for Leadership and Education, who stated, "The future is not some place we are going, but a place we are creating. The paths to the future are not found, but made. This is the future that our journey of hope must aspire to and live. Sister Doris Gottmuller, a former president of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, in a recent article notes that despite the diminishment of religious in recent years, God's grace is no less available to us now than it was to our predecessors. Like them, we have to listen to the voices of the poor and act with compassion. Like them, we have to marshal our resources and act with courage. Like them, we have to renew our purpose and act with confidence. Key to the future, according to Sister Doris, is a deeply held faith in God and God's plan for us that is broader and deeper than any of us imagine, and an unwavering sense of hope grounded in faith and deepened in prayer. Folks, this is our one and only moment in time. Difficult and perplexing, yes, but a moment no less full of potential and grace than any other moment in history. Strengthened by the grace of this moment, it is our duty and our privilege, in the words of the Rule of 1718 on the Spirit of the Institute, to possess, to preserve, and to increase this spirit, our shared charism, across and among all of our apostolic communities. We have been entrusted with a great legacy from all of the brothers and partners who have preceded us. Let us pass this gift on to our young brothers and partners with great faith, zeal, and trust in God's providence and in God's creative imagination to prepare and prosper the next chapter in our history. Let us have no doubt that the words of John Baptist de La Salle are still true. The need for this institute is very great. To paraphrase the Rule of the Brothers, Article 141, the young, the poor, the world, and the church still need the ministry of the LaSallian community. You have been wonderful. Thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you, Brother Dennis. As we move to our table discussions on vitality, vision issues for the district, we begin our end time for our table discussions is 3:15. Thank you.